as many of you know, I made a film a few years ago called The 600, and my relationship to Rwanda is that I'm married to someone from Rwanda. And when I made that film, I was looking at the library of films made about 1994, and I was a little dissatisfied with what I was seeing. I saw films that were made through Western lenses, where story accuracy was not important, where heroes were created who were not actually heroes, where characters who were made up out of whole cloth never existed, and this is how the story has been presented to the rest of the world and to Rwanda itself. And I really felt that this film library needs to be refreshed with new films for new generations so they can appreciate the history and the truth of what happened. And I think it's very important to keep the narrative fresh so that the narrative doesn't get twisted, doesn't get revised, it doesn't get denied. And it's important, I think, for my Rwandan, family and country to have control of the narrative of their own history. And so telling the story of Bisesero outside of Rwanda, it's an unknown story. And also living in the West, as I do most of the time, it's very infuriating for me to see the narrative about Rwanda that the Western media portrays. Major news organizations, like in my country, the New York Times, continuously get it wrong. And it's frustrating. And film is a very powerful medium. Even though social media is taking over the world, I still think film is more powerful than social media. So when we make this film, it's for Rwanda, but it's for the world. And it's for the world to understand the context of even the things that are going on today in East Africa are very easier to explain when you understand what happened in 1994. We're really excited about doing this. Wale Ojo has been up to Bisesero many times. He's really thrown himself into the research for this work. Mandla Wale and I have gone up together recently. I also want to acknowledge the presence of Tracy Kababito, a great actress from Uganda, who's going to be playing the role of Epiphany. And our story, in order to make this story accessible, the strategy was, let's tell it from the point of view of somebody who survived and someone who was close to Barara, the leader of the resistance. So we're telling the story from the point of view of Epiphany, who was about 17 years old at the time, one of Barara's daughters, who fought by his side and who survived, who lives in Bisesero to this day, has rebuilt her life, started a new family, lives among the people, many of them were her perpetrators against her family, but she's symbolic. She's symbolic of the rebirth of Rwanda. She's symbolic of the resilience of Rwanda. And also her story as a 17-year-old girl is one that is important to tell a woman's point of view of going through that experience. And the fact that, that she is alive today to tell her story through our film means everything, and I think it'll make it more relatable to people in the audience worldwide. So that's my general kind of sense of why we've spent the last 4 or 5 years developing this project. We've had so many obstacles. We can talk later about why it's so hard to make an independent film in Africa about a subject like this, because the rest of the world feels like, well, Rwanda had their movie. Hotel Rwanda, Don Cheadle, he was the hero. It's like there's so much more that we need to do to keep the narrative, fresh. And it's been very difficult to fight against that kind of inertia from the rest of the world when they feel like, oh, we've already had this movie. There's been a handful of movies about what happened during the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, but really a handful, and we just don't have enough of stories about real heroes and real people and what happened. And then I compare it to movies about the Holocaust, which was 70 years ago, and there have been 400 movies, and they come out every year. And that's by design, I think, because there's so many stories within, that tragic event, but it's important to keep telling them so people, are informed correctly, because there's also revisionists and they're deniers of the Holocaust. So we can't, we fight back with film, and film is very powerful.